Welcome to the 5th video in my second chapter of our game design project here for our ActionRPG. In this video, we're going to make the prefab for the fireball. And actually, we could say fireballs, plural, and we'll make 3 different ones out of the sprite sheet that we see up here. And so we're just going to make the prefab here and then also set up some of the player animations. So we're not actually going to get to coding it. That will be in future videos. So let's begin. So we're going to need this graphic, and that is inside of the textures file. The textures download, and inside of the projectile subfolder. And so we've got energyfireball.png. So let's bring that into the textures player attacks folder, and we'll drag and drop it. And it sits side by side with my melee attacks. And so that's going to be the graphics that we're going to use for our fireball. So to begin, we are going to have to do a little bit of configuring for it. So first up, it is a sprite sheet, so we need to change it from single to multiple. The pixels per unit, this is meant to be on a 32 pixel scale, so we'll switch that to 32. And then lastly, we will change the filter mode to point, because this is a very small pixel image. We don't want it to try to blend our pixels to make it look smoothed. So hit apply. Then we'll go to the sprite editor. Now we're going to cut this thing up. Now, fortunately, these are already arranged in 32 by 32 pixel squares. The larger ones are actually 2 squares big, and I'll show you how we can do that. So let's slice it, and we want to slice by grid by cell size. And so we don't want 64. I said these were 32 by 32 pixels. The pivot, there's decent argument for us going with center or middle right, so the right. Because if we did right, then it would put the pivoting right on the tip of the fireball. But if we put it in the center, I think the rotation makes a little bit more sense. So we will slice it with the pivot at the center. All right, click slice. And you can barely see these white rectangles being built around each frame in the sprite sheet. However, we've got 2 sets of squares here on this bottom one. So I'm going to delete the top one, and I'm actually deleting the top one because when I resize these, it goes, additional heights go up. So I click on this leftmost, and this one's height, instead of 32, I want 64. And you can see how that actually makes this slice perfectly for the rest of the fireball. Alright, so we've got all those. I am going to go through and rename these to Fireball LVL1 _ 1. So it's a level 1 fireball, the first frame of it. We could try to be a little bit more specific and say like travel, but it's such a simple graphic, I'm not going to really bother. So we've got Fireball level 1 through, and then _1, 2, 3, and 4. Then this is going to be called Fireball level 1 _ hit _1. Maybe we'll call it impact. Because this is the graphic that's going to play when the fireball hits something. And since I want to go through all the different ones here, I am going to rename these so we can have a Fireball level 2. And we can get all those named as well. Since I don't see the harm in going through and looking at how we can build a prefab and then kind of quickly build some other prefabs for the other fireballs as well. And then inside your game, you can choose how you want the player to progress this attack. In one of the optional videos after, I am going to talk about how to make the fireball a charge up attack. So meaning as the player holds down the mouse, the fireball gets more powerful. But for this video, we're just going to go for the simple, where if you just click the right mouse button, it's going to shoot a fireball in the direction of the mouse. And then if you would like to try to make a charged fireball, that will be in one of the subsequent videos. But while we're here renaming these, there's really no harm in going through and renaming all my fireballs. So I got the fireballs level 1 through 3, and all of them are named. So then I click apply, and I am done with this, so I can close that, and I can expand and see that I've got all of my named sprites right here. So much easier to work with them if you rename your sprites, rather than leaving it to just fireball 01, 02, 03, and so on. Okay, so at this point, we could probably start making the fireball prefab. So let's start. And so you can start the prefab by dragging and dropping just one of these sprites into the world. So like if I were to drag and drop this, like so, you can actually see that it does make a sprite. The only reason I'm not a huge fan of actually creating the object that way is because of the naming system that it gives it. And then when we go on to make the animations, we have to make sure we've renamed this, otherwise it'll have kind of a stupid file name. So I'm going to rename this off of that, which was the name of the sprite, and I'm going to call this Fireball Level 1. And it's got its sprite renderer, transforms fine. So let's go and build the animation for this thing. So if I switch over to, so while it's selected, that's the important part. If I switch over to the animation tool, which is Windows Animation, then I click Create, I can make my animation for it. So the player subfolder is fine, and I'm going to make another subfolder called Fireballs. And I'm going to put all of my different fireball animations inside of here. And I'm going to call this Fireball underscore level 1 underscore travel. Then push enter. All right, so this sprite, I'm actually going to leave it on the scale of 60 just for the sake of showing that you can just space these out differently. And I'm going to multi-select 1 through 4 and drag them in. Then I've got to space these out. I think there are some tools that let you like group scale them, but I don't really remember. Anyway, I'm going to turn on ripple just to force it forward. And I'm going to move this first one up to the 0.5 index. And then I'm going to move the next one up to the 0.10 index. And I'm going to move the last one up to the 0.15 index. Then, because this last frame doesn't get a keyframe out here, and if I right click and just go to add keyframe, I think it actually adds the first one, which is kind of annoying because I want to have this same graphic all the way through. So I'm just going to bring a level 4, oh, I'm sorry, the fourth frame of a level 1 onto 19. Because then it finishes on 20, giving each of these 5 seconds. I think I may in the last video have said you can just use an animation event to extend it out. But if you don't ever assign a function to it, it actually will just throw an error every time. So you don't want to use animation events to extend out a animation. You actually need to drop in another copy of that last frame. And so I have 2 copies of Fireball Level 1 Frame 4 placed on here. So we can pull this animation out and, whoops, and we can take a look to see what it looks like. So if we hit play, that's what this is going to look like as it travels through the air. It looks good. I was actually planning on making the other fireballs look like they're animating slower to kind of give them a more powerful appearance. But we also need to create the hit, the impact. So I'm going to create a new clip, and I'm going to call this fireball underscore level 1 underscore impact. And the impact frame for this, I'm going to multi-select and bring in all 3 of these. And I think Ripple's still on. Ripple's still on. So I'm going to stretch these apart. So I want to bring this up to, oops. Control Z is your friend. I'm going to bring this up to the 0.6 indicator, and then this next one is going to go up to the 12. But so that's basically meaning I'm trying to get 6 increments on here. So I'm going to bring an impact 3 in at 17, so that this last one still gets 6 ticks of a frame to go. Because you can see that this is giving us, oh, it's still rippling. But you can kind of see that it extends it out. So like because it's on 19, it's showing that it goes to 20 now. But so like I said, I needed this to go to 17 so that it finishes on 18. All right. And so if we wanted to preview this, we can see that that's going to, it'll only play 1 copy of that, but that's what it's going to do. And so that is the animations for there. So we can close this. Well, I'm going to redock it back in here. And let's go take a look at the animator for this. So these aren't blend trees, so we don't need to go build a whole new blend tree. We can actually use these existing things. So we've got my impact animation here, or my travel animation here, and impact there. So really the only thing that we need to kind of worry about is we just need to transition into the hit phase. So we need to add a parameter to cause that. I'm going to add a trigger called impact. And then I'm going to right click my state here and make a transition into the, ooh, this is just called fireball. It's really hiding that one. Maybe I named that animation wrong. Yeah, I missed the 1 on there. I need to go back and fix that. All right, well, we're going to delete that. Back to the animation. So I'm going to just verify that I've deleted that animation out of here. I mean, I guess I could just rename it. So I'll right-click or F2 and then rename it. Go back to my animator, and I can bring it back in just by dragging and dropping it. So we'll make the transition back into here. This condition for the transition is the impact has been set. And we don't need an exit time because we want this to happen instantaneously. And again, a transition of 0 because we want this to happen the moment it says go to the impact, immediately go to the impact. Don't take time to exit that state. And then it doesn't really matter from here because this will just finish. We could, if we are concerned, we could make the impacts not loop. So I'm going to uncheck that from selecting the animation of the impact. And so now we've got our fireball level 1 essentially good to go. Let's throw a few extra things on here to kind of finish up the prefab for this. So it's going to want a circle collider. I mean, you could make an argument for a capsule collider. It does kind of look like a capsule. If we did a circle collider, we could then maybe just kind of have it pick the front of it. So like we could aim the circle collider like that. So I mean the idea is that little flame trail behind it actually isn't part of the hitbox, only like the front of it is. But if you disagree with that, you could just go and add a capsule collider and make the entire thing the hitbox. So choice is yours on how you want to approach that. But this looks like it's reasonably good for me. And then I'm going to add a physics 2D rigid body 2D. And with that, the big difference is I'm going to take it off of dynamic and move it to kinematic, because I don't really want it to interact with the physics engine. I just want to move it via code, and that's what a kinematic rigid body does. Let's also make this a trigger, because I don't want it to be a quote solid object. I just want it to be a sensor zone. And then here, let's see, all this looks fine. Freeze rotation is yeah, I don't want it to randomly kind of spin around. And lastly, this is kind of the newer thing. The thing that I set up a while back is the physics layer. So if you did those things in that other video where we have a ground and an air layer, I want to put the fireball on the air layer because I don't want it intersecting with physics objects on the ground layer, which means it's going to fly over water, but the player will collide with water, and it'll fly over anything else that's on the blocking low layer. But like high things such as cliffs will cause it to impact. So that looks good. If you didn't have those layers, just go to add layer and add a ground and an air layer. And then also just make sure that under your project settings, physics 2D, that ground and air don't actually intersect. You can also get a little bit more detailed, and you can put the cliffs on a totally different layer than blocking high, etc., etc. All right, so fireball looks pretty good. We will eventually have to put a script on it, but that's going to be in the next video. So let's take the fireball and turn it into a prefab. So I'm going to minimize some of this. So I'm going to take the fireball level 1 and drag it into that player prefab folder. And so I have my fireball level 1 prefab ready to go. Now I can safely delete this and repeat the process for the other fireballs. So you can kind of rewind the video and do that. So I'm going to do those off camera. You can just follow the same exact steps to create level 1, 2, and 3. So in the next video, I will already have those done. But if you're not planning on doing the charge up fireball, you don't need to do those. Lastly, let's get the player's attack animation set up, since that's the last thing we're going to need to begin coding. So hopefully inside of your player, you've had a chance to rename all the different frames, specifically the one, so we can see these attacking ones. Specifically next to those, we want to have these renamed to player attack range down 1 and player attack range down 2. Then these are player cast down 1 and player cast down 2. So all of these need to be renamed. And if you need to do that, maybe pause the video and go through and make sure these have been renamed. So we've got player attack ranged and we've got player cast down. So just make sure that you have renamed those. All right, so to get the players, attack animations going. So that's going to be selecting the player prefab, and we're going to just need to build another animation here. So I'm going to be making the cast animation, so that the animation where the player basically puts their hand forward to indicate that they're kind of throwing a fireball. So I'm going to go to create a new clip, and in the player folder, I'm going to call this player underscore cast underscore down. And if you're noticing, I've actually already created the other ones here because it's going to be literally the same thing 4 times in a row. So I'm going to create the player cast down animation. I'm going to hit save. And now I'm going to go put these animations together. So I'm going to leave this on the scale of 60. And of the frames that I wanted, I actually want the second one here of this ranged attack. I don't really want the first one where he has one of his eyes closed. I want this attack range down 2. And so I'm just going to go to, this is the down version. I'm going to take it down 2, put it into the 0, 0 position. But I want this entire animation to last about, let me check what I did for the other ones. I want it to last 15 indicators, so that's 1/4 of a second. So I'm going to drag and drop a player ranged attack down 2 on the 14 so that keyframe pushes this last one out to the 15. So you want to drag the same exact one, player ranged down 2 onto 14 and onto 0. And so that gives us this animation. I've already completed all the other ones. So if you want to pause the video now and go through and do that same process for all the other directions. All right, to continue, we need to go to the animator to attach these, and you'll notice it just haphazardly throws these 4 new things here into the center. Great. But we want a blend tree, so I'm going to delete these. And I want a new blend tree, kind of like how I had the attack blend tree. So I can make things easier and just duplicate this. I know in the previous video I did it manually, but let's duplicate it. We can right-click and copy, and then right-click and paste, and we have our new blend tree. I'll rename it to cast, and then double-click it to begin editing it. And I need to just reassign these attack down, attack up, attack. So I'm just going to take in my cast animations, which is under animations player, and you can see I've got my cast ones here. So I'm going to take player cast down and replace player attack down. I'm going to take player cast up and replace player attack up, player cast right, and player cast left. So those have been done. Cool. Go back up to the base layer, and now we've just got to set up the triggers to get this to happen. So I want to make another type of trigger here, and this one's going to be called cast. So we're going to do an any state transition, right click on any state, and we're going to transition to the blend tree for casting. And we're going to actually set it up exactly like we did with this. So exiting out, it does not have an exit time, and the duration is 0 for the transition. And the condition is that the cast trigger has been activated. That's going to bump us to here. Then we want to send it back into the idle state when we're done. So we're going to do what we did on the blend tree attack, which really is nothing. Just when this animation finishes, go. So right click on blend tree cast, make a transition back to blend tree idle, and we want this to have an exit time of 1 and a transition of 0. So when it's done, it should just immediately jump back over to the blend tree. If you are really worried, nah, let's just make it 0. It works. So now whenever we hit the trigger for cast, it's going to bump us there and send us back. And we can do a lot of the similar things, like if we wish to add the trigger to end being in the attack state, I could add that to the animations. And what I mean by that is, if you notice how this player attack left, the sword swing, has the end attack animation command, we could probably reuse that depending on how we wish to set up the ranged attack. So that actually concludes what we were working on. Kind of weird that my attack up is missing, but we're cast up. So with that, I think we're ready to move on to the coding of this. So I will join you again for coding. So if you wanted to, while the video, in between videos, I am going to make fireballs ranks 1, 2, and 3, so that I actually have fireballs of all ranks. So this would be a good time, because when I pick up in the extra video about charging up the fireballs, I will have all of them done.